I've discussed previously the importance of my consistent writing schedule, making sure I keep that consistent goal each week, obtainable goal each week. In this episode, I'm going to be covering what my weekly writing schedule looks like. Hello, everybody. My name is Alex Shagir, and I'm an epic fantasy author. My first book, Breaking, is going to be coming out fairly soon, so I hope that you enjoy it. But in the meantime, I'm going to be creating some content. I have some exciting releases coming in December for you that directly relates to my book. But for this episode, I'm going to be touching on a topic that I think is just kind of important to understand and get familiar with my writing process, just so you kind of know week in and week out what I am up to. Um, I've discussed previously, I really find consistency is very important. If I cannot set obtainable goals that I can get either each day or each week, then there's no use in setting them up. I need to set goals that I know I'll be able to reach every single week. I'd like to do kind of an in-depth video sometime in the future on like a day in the life kind of situation, but for now, this will suffice just discussing what my weekly writing schedule looks like. So first off, um, is my first draft. And so for my first draft, roughly speaking, I try to write 10,000 words each week. It usually falls between 8 and 10,000 words, but I strive for that 10,000 words. Um, and I try to write a little something every day, even on the weekends, but the weekends tend to get extremely busy, whether it's traveling, visiting family on the weekend, family visiting us on the weekend. Um, Vacation times we usually plan around the weekend time, and then just a bunch of other stuff, family things. Kids might stay up a little bit later, so the weekend has too many variables for me to keep a consistent schedule. Again, consistency is key, right? So even though I try to write some on the weekend, I don't have a set goal on the weekend simply because um, I just know that I'm not going to obtain those goals. And if I do, I'll get discouraged and I'll fall into the next week and so on and so forth. So I really try to write my first draft on 4 days of the week, Monday through Thursday, because I know, except for maybe some holidays and some vacation times, 90+% of the time, I'm going to be able to write on those days. And I do it when I'm at home, either usually depending on the night, either super late at night or super early in the morning before I get to work. Just so I can concentrate and put in my earbuds, I can listen, I can concentrate. I write my 2,500 words each of those days to get to 10,000 words in the week. And that's kind of what I write on my first draft. This isn't, I almost started to dive into how I write my first draft. I've talked about that previously. I'll probably go in depth on that further in the future, but that's what my writing schedule looks like for the week. Really, it's those 4 days a week. I try to strive for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights, getting into the week, starting off strong, getting those 2,500 words in each sitting. And that takes about 2 to 2.5 hours. When I'm really locked in, headphones in, got some music going, and just really concentrating on what I'm writing. It shouldn't take more than 2.5 hours unless it's a real slow night, and usually the majority of the time I'll hit that word count by the 2 hour mark. Um, anyway, I'll move on to the second draft so I don't discuss the first draft even more. Second draft, what that looks like for me is a time goal. Um, I set about 8 hours a week that I look to target for editing my second draft. That might be less, might be maybe 5 hours, just depending on the need for it. My first few books are going to be smaller, so I don't need to spend as much time concentrating on maybe a little bit more different things. Trying to focus a lot more on my outlining actually, just to get prepared for my future books and kind of get ahead of schedule, more or less, you could say. But for my second draft, 5 to 8 hours a week, I try to hit that 8 hours. I don't really have a chapter goal, although sometimes when I sit down during the day, if I say, okay, how many chapters would get me about 2 hours a day? Is that going to be like one? And I'll go through chapters multiple times. I don't just go through a chapter, then I'm one and done. But I'll kind of try to find a spot to end. It might be an hour and a half. It might be a little bit more, a little bit less. But I try to hit that 2 hour mark. Again, kind of each of those midweek days, but some of it might roll into the weekend. The second draft, third draft, all the rest of the stuff is a little bit easier to flow into the weekend time because rather than putting in my earbuds and locking in on writing the first draft and having that concentration, the second draft, outlining, I can sit down for 30 minutes here and there and plug away through it when I have the opening. So that's a little bit different. Final drafts look very much the same as the second draft. I try to hit that 8 hour a week mark. And for me, uh, the final draft, I'm going through the final draft now with my first book. It's right at the very end. And I've read that book so many times. So I, the 8 hour a week mark isn't, I don't really, I don't have a check mark or checkbox. Well, actually, I do, but I don't really use it to kind of check off 8 hours in the week. It's more or less what needs to be done. So some weeks I might not do any because I might not have a final draft to kind of pour through. I might be caught up. I send it to my core readers. But then if I get something back from them, I might put in, 10 plus hours in a week because I really want to, while their notes are still fresh in my mind, kind of get through some changes or make my own notes about it. So that can be a little bit up and down, but roughly around 8 hours a week, maybe a little bit less average throughout the year, maybe even a little bit more, but so I kinda set that target for me. Outlining, it's kind of a theme. Each block I kinda set about 8 hours a week in, and it comes out to about 40 hours a week. I take even though I enjoy writing it, right, it's a fun hobby of mine, I take it more seriously than a hobby, right? I treat it like, I wanna do this for a living, and so, I set about 40 hours, 40 to 45 hours a week doing this because I treat it seriously. So outlining, and I'll kind of combine that with my world building. Each of those take about 8 hours a week. The reason why I'm combining them is so the outlining is specifically for my books, and I outline very in depth. So my outlines will be about 10 to 15% of the word count for my final book, which might not seem like a lot, but if you think maybe um, say 100,000 word book, that's 10,000 words of outlining. And again, it's usually more if you include in the introduction that I make for the characters, but the actual chapter to chapter takes up about 10 to 15% of what the final version is. And it's because I try to be as detailed as I can without actually writing the book like a first draft. Um, so yeah, I tend to spend about 8 hours on that a week. And then again, the same thing for the world building. The world building is a little bit different, right? So yes, my books have lore in it. They definitely have world building. I try to put in an appropriate amount, so not to overwhelm the reader, in that it's appropriate for the reading and to get introduced into my universe. But for me, especially this early on, I'm building as kind of what you would think as I guess any epic fantasy author, but you almost think Token like, where he kind of put together the Silmarillion, and those were his notes put together and the story he wanted to tell to of his world. It's more or less that my world building, and that's for me to know to help me with future series. At some point, I'll be done with the world building. At some point, I'm trying to really piece together my world over the next several years so that when I kind of come to some grand plans in the future, I have my world, my universe all laid out, and I know exactly when I want to tell a specific story, the exact setting that that's in, how it all got there, where I want it to end up by the end of it all. So the world building part is mostly for me. Obviously, it's to help you so I make a better book for the reader, but that's for me so that I know, so that I can create. I have all these stories in my head. I have the history of the worlds in my head. So that's what that's in there for. So 8 hours might seem like a lot, but it's very important for me. Again, kind of that architect side of my mind where I need to kind of know when I'm going into writing something, I need to know all the details of it, or else when I get to my first draft, I'm going to be scattered, frustrated, and I won't even write the first draft. So I have to kind of go in knowing a plan, knowing what's happening in that setting. And then just kind of some miscellaneous stuff throughout the week. Thoughts on future books and series. Even though I write, I kind of plan on I usually am working on 3 books at once. So I'll be, like, editing the first draft for writing the first draft for one, editing the second and thirds for another 1 or 2, outlining maybe even for a fourth, just to kinda depends on how it all lays out. And then, always thinking ahead on future books and series, making notes, writing stuff down. I don't have an hourly cycle on it, that's just a constant thinking throughout the week. My podcast episodes and my map making, those kinda go hand in hand because I kinda do them together. So I'm, obviously making a podcast episode now, and then in a couple days, I'm going to be, doing a long form piece on making the map for my first book. I'm making my own maps for my book, and I'm gonna come out with an episode talking about that, so I won't go too, specific here. Um, But that's going to be really fun for me. I'm going to sit down, try to do it in one full sitting. I think I'll be able to. And then create some videos, some commentary for you so you can kind of see the process. You can see the map of my book so you kind of can see that beforehand. And, yeah, so that'll be really fun. And then just a bunch of, other content, miscellaneous things, keeping up with social media, editing the podcast, a lot goes into it. At the end of the day, there's probably 40 to 50 hours or so of work that goes into my writing, and that just depends on the week, depends on what I have going on, depends on if I'm in a final draft of my book or not, what I'm doing for my map making, so all those variables kinda go into it, but the most important is just writing that first draft each week, right? The consistency of it, as long as that kind of is the foundational building block for everything else. If I can get those 4 days in of consistent writing, 2,500 words each day, couple hours, 2 to 2.5 hours each of those days, that sets me up for success for the rest of the week. And that's why I have it. Sunday, I kind of take off to relax from the week, whether it's from chores or just the world. I kind of use that to relax. And then Sunday night, I hit it hard, right? To get me started for the week, to get me going on that good foot. So that's kind of what my weekly writing schedule looks like. I hope that kind of gave you some insight into just to understand what my week looks like. So when you're reading my book, you kind of know the time and effort that went into it. Time and effort I'm definitely making each week to make these books a success. And yeah, I hope it flows through, and I hope that you do end up enjoying my books. And I hope this was beneficial to you. Thank you for watching along. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Definitely give this video a like. Comment if you haven't. You can feel free to reach out and contact me through my website. I have a contact form. We can talk about whatever you'd like to. And again, my first book, Breaking, is going to be coming out within the next couple months. I don't have a set date yet, but that is fast approaching. So again, thank you for your support, and I will see you next time.